One of the important things that you need to be aware of when it comes to uncovering your soul abilities, your soul senses, is how your ego gets involved. Now, everybody's got an ego. It's working to protect your social status, and a lot of ways it gets in the way. It gets in the way of your messaging. It gets in the way of you trying to ground. It gets in the way of you trying to open up. And we're going to address the ego today so you can get to know one of the big obstacles that will get in your way during your journey of uncovering your soul abilities, your soul senses, all the things that you want to learn about yourself and that the ego tries to keep you from. And that is this episode on NextGEN Medium, the podcast. Hey there, my name's Sarah Nickerson. I uncovered my psychic mediumship intuitive abilities just a few years ago. Before that, I had no idea I could do this stuff. I think I had a couple hints along the way, but nothing that just hit me over the head with, holy crap, I'm a psychic. And I don't like to think of it like that because I believe that everybody is a psychic. I believe everybody has intuition. I think these are soul abilities that are part of our birthright of entering this world. It's a part of being a human being. And so my mission is to make people aware that this is a thing, that this is something you can do. And I want to help you by imparting the knowledge that I've gained so far, my experience, what is my truth. So maybe it can help you with your experience of getting to that threshold, understanding it's not an easy process, understanding that it's a way of reframing how you see the world and maybe reframing how you see yourself. Okay, hey, I'm setting it up for us talking about the ego. So the ego we like to think of as our identity, and in a lot of ways the ego wants to protect what we perceive our identity to be. And in that, the ego really wants to protect yourself in ways in which people view you, and you do that through the power of your ego. So to set up this episode, first I got to kind of bring out this three selves theory where we make decisions, we do what we do because of three influences, three parts of yourself. And these three parts are working to protect what they are supposed to protect. So let's talk about this real quick. We got the three selves. We have an animal instinctual self. I like to also talk about this in a way where we can visualize Maslow's hierarchy, Maslow's triangle. And at the bottom of the triangle, we are trying to meet our basic needs. And this triangle is just basically how each individual human, or even you can look at it as a civilization, kind of needs to go through these stages in order to be a higher being, a higher individual, to get to that place of a higher sense of self. At the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, you have the base, which is meeting your basic needs of food, shelter, clothing. We'll put water in there as well because you need that to survive. Like your body needs that. Next up is sort of like a social block that is working off of that base. And this is gaining identity. It's how do you fit in with society, meeting your wants that you want in life. And then at the very top is your self-actualization. And so I'm taking this traditional Maslow's hierarchy and I'm fitting our three selves in this. And so at the bottom, that survival component, the self that is trying to take care of that is the animal instinctual self. This is your self that is trying to protect your body. It's trying to make sure it's fed, make sure it's watered, make sure it's protected. So that is your animal instinctual self. And you respond with your animal instinctual self. Fight or flight. That's an example of what is sort of hardwired into your animal brain, okay? So next up, we have the egoic self. And that self is looking to preserve your social status. So when we look at Maslow's triangle, we're in the middle in that second part of the triangle, which is sandwiched in between the basic needs and the self-actualization sections of that triangle. And the egoic self is trying to preserve your identity and where you belong in your social strata. So the ego is trying to protect what you perceive as your boundaries of what is acceptable in the group that you live in, the society. It also thinks it understands who you are and what rules you need to live by in order to maintain integrity and value. Really, that's the big key, your value. And ego is trying to preserve that. Next up, you have your higher self, and that is the third self that we talk about. And this is the third self that we are learning the language of when it comes to soul abilities, soul work. Okay? So this portion of decision making, this entity, I don't really think of it separate from me. I think it's a part of me. This component is looking to preserve your spiritual path, your boundlessness, absolute happiness. So these are sort of the goals of the higher self in that top point of that Maslow's hierarchy, that self-actualization section of the triangle. That's where the higher self is, and that's where you have to work through that basic needs to the identity, the social strata, up to you. Who are you? What's the point of doing what you do and why you do it? That's what the higher self wants to do. It's giving you purpose. It wants to lead you to your purpose. And sometimes it takes tearing apart what's come before for you to lead up to that self-actualization place. Sometimes you kind of got to tear apart what's got you there, which is your identity, sometimes your basic needs place. Okay, so we've set it up. We got our three selves. We got our animal instinctual self, our monkey brain. We've got our egoic self, and we've got our higher self. All right, so let's dive in to ego. What is ego? Ego is pretty much what you know it to be. Now, we kind of look at it as ego is a way of putting yourself before others, and why not? Why not have that piece of you in order to beat the competition? That's the point of the ego, is you are more valuable than the other people around you, and that's how you can succeed and get the things that you want, rather than just the things you need. Your ego tells you you are worthy, that you are right, and that you are better than others. It's a piece of ourselves that we've developed in order to survive in our social lives. Ego is a part of all of us, and it serves to get our share. This helps us to meet those basic needs, but go just beyond that and become valuable in our society. But the ego, alongside the higher self, is a constant battle for the soul. Now, when it comes to developing our soul abilities, we actually have to draw on the ego's belief individually that you are special enough to be psychic, be a medium, or to have intuition. So our society believes these are special things. Some people believe it's not even a thing. And maybe we need to have the ego to believe, I can prove that this is true. I need to prove it to myself. But the ego would be going in with the idea of, I think this is me. And aren't you special? Well, guess what? We're all special because we all got it. So there goes a little bit of deflating the ego that you are more valuable than other people when it comes to your soul abilities because you got them and so does everybody else. But like I said, I believe we all have these soul abilities. It's our birthrights, but our society isn't quite there yet. Okay, fine. Ego instinctually resides in our learning of the soul abilities, but its presence infiltrates our development in ways that hinder our results. It creeps in when you twist logic into a message to make it make logical sense. Or ego creeps in when you feel pressured to please your sitter, the person you're doing a reading for. And there are examples we're going to go through of ways to identify when the ego is creeping in and it's impeding on your process. And I'll also give examples of how you may perceive an event which shows your ego at work, even if you didn't notice that the ego was present. But do know, ego is a hurdle that we all have to overcome in order to find truth, to find our truth individually and maybe as a society. We need to be able to detach ourselves from our ego, to detach the ego as it's there to protect what we perceive our identity to be. And with this understanding of where the ego infiltrates what you're doing, you start to understand how it gets in the way, why it's a pain in the ass to have to deal with. At first, you might not be able to see it, but with time, you really will start to identify it. It is an internal fight, calming that ego down, allowing your heart to open up, and your heart is where the truth is. So honestly, it's never a battle that's won, but there's sort of this calming it when it surfaces that is a constant thing you need to have in your attention when you are working on your soul abilities, your soul senses, when you're all up in that stuff. In the end, we're working on building integrity and having confidence and helping other people. So with that, we need to face our ego in order to get to truth. And it does get easier to let go of it once you start identifying it and you see how it impedes your process. Letting go of it actually frees up a lot of the frustration. So let's look at ways that ego gets in the way with our psychic and other soul abilities. So I have a few ways that ego gets in the way with our soul psychic abilities. These are just a few, all right? There's probably a lot more, but these are the ones I've noticed in my own practice, in my own growth, and I can impart this upon to you from my own perspective. Frankly, when ego is getting in the way, I'm going to say this over and over in like every segment, but it is overcomplicating the process dealing with your ego. And if you have the perseverance, which you do, because getting to know your soul abilities is knowing you even more. And who doesn't want to know fully what you are capable of and who you are? So ego might think it knows who you are, but getting to know your soul senses, your soul abilities is expanding and challenging your ego into who you actually are, what you are actually capable of. So here are ways that ego gets in the way. One is that it assumes. When we are having difficulty, when we don't understand the logic, we start filling in blanks. Okay, we're playing the odds, we're closing out possibility to narrow down probability. Ego is getting in the way because it is assuming. I like to talk about it as an it because then we're objectifying it instead of personalizing your ego. Again, we need to separate the ego from yourself. It's only a component. It's not who you are. Next up, the ego wants to please. It wants to show its worth. It wants to show your worth. As a receiver, an interpreter, your message is what is valued. So if you can't please the client with your value, then you don't have value. So the ego wants to rush in to please. Know that will be coming in when you do readings. Next up, the ego second guesses. It doubts the message. It doubts the sounds, the things that are being said to you through your psychic soul senses. The ego has a really hard time with this whole concept in general because this isn't possible in our society. It shouldn't be possible, or it's very rare. Again, my belief is that everybody has this. So your ego is going to fight to adhere to the world's, the norms, all the things that you know of the world to be true. When you're getting to know the soul abilities, you are challenging this. And so the ego will get in the way by doubting the message and second guessing. By doubting the message, doubting your ability, and doubting yourself. The ego's just trying to preserve what it knows. Don't let it do that. And lastly, the ego has an ulterior motive. If there's anything about soul work that you need to understand right now, it's that feeding the ego using your soul abilities is not going to help your cause, whatever it may be. So intention must be driven by true higher energy emotions like love and compassion and gratitude, and working to inflate the ego to impress, to hold power over somebody, or to manipulate someone. These are negative vibrations, and you can't sustain that for a long time. And operating like this will bring that same energy back to you. It's sort of part of the laws of this whole energy work, and it's not going to be good for you in the long run. And you know what? It's not good for me either. So stop making the rest of us look bad by having those inflated ego motivations. Don't make me look bad. So when you're doing your soul work, you're investigating, you're experiencing to get to know, to become familiar with this place, these senses, these abilities. How can you identify when ego is blocking you? I'm going to give you some examples that you will be familiar with, and maybe laying it out will help verbalize what you experience so you can be able to connect with that. I've had some experience, and the ego has been there with me right along, just like it's there for you. Ways that I've noticed that the ego blocks me when I'm trying to connect, when I am connecting, but I'm feeling uncertain about things, I will notice it in these particular instances, which maybe you'll be able to identify with for yourself. One is that you're mulling on a message for too long. You're getting something, you're getting a visual, and then you really start picking it apart and start getting into the details. And let's talk about this for a second, because we're going to go a little bit deeper with this one, because this is a good learning moment. So you get a message and then you start overanalyzing it. Okay, you're mulling on it. And what's important to know about the messaging that you receive, either through visualizations, through things that are being said to you, you hear auditory, you hear through your clairaudience or the knowings. What's important to know is that these messages come on in sort of a timely manner. So let's talk about the time that's involved, and then you'll know what too long actually means. Think of messages like a hot iron. To test it, to make sure it's ready, you know how you tap it? Okay. You tap it to make sure it's ready, but you're not holding on to the iron, because then you'll get burned. And this is a great example because there's also a timing component that goes right in line with when and how you receive messaging, how quick it can be. Don't overanalyze the message that's coming through, because overanalyzing is doubting your abilities. And this is when self-doubt overcomplicates your reading. Okay, this is a big one for when ego creeps in. The great thing about this hot iron example is the timing. So when you're hitting an iron, that amount of time is the flash you get of your messaging. And the longer you sit on that information, it's going to start evolving into something else, which is not true to the message that was intended. So you have to interpret it and move on, or else your message starts becoming something it's not supposed to be. Next up is self-doubt creeping in and just keeps getting closer to you. So it rears its ugly face, maybe a little bit of doubt in there, and then it just haunts the rest of the reading. Sometimes it's hard to get out of this mindset of, oh crap, this isn't going very well. And then it just gets worse and worse, and you start doubting everything that comes through. There's sort of an ability you need to develop where you just need to brush it off and recenter, reground, and move on. Or else the reading will just go to crap, and then you're going to be sitting there going, I really can do this when it comes to, having a client in front of you. If you want to get to, that serious of things. But frankly, when you're able to have information that you communicate and someone can relate to what you're saying, they understand what you're saying, they understand the significance of what you're saying, it really is rewarding. It really does have a rewarding component to it. But even that within itself is egoic. And so brushing off the wins and the not wins, not losing, because it really isn't a win or a lose. It's am I accurate? That's really where you should be. And when self-doubt creeps in, sometimes you got to stop the reading or just stop what you're doing. And maybe you're just not going to be in the mindset for that particular time. But sometimes it can get hard to get back in. You got to be able to swipe it off, let that ego go, let it not be personal, and just move forward, move beyond it, because then you'll start getting those gold nuggets of information that the person can be like, oh, I get it now. And then you start feeling better about yourself. So you got to be able to brush it off and move on. Just keep connecting to that place where images are flashing through or things are being said to you, and it will lead you to where you need to be. Another way that ego blocks is that you notice you're upset after you do readings, and you're upset because maybe the reading didn't go well. That's why you're upset, is because the reading didn't go well. And this would be an example that kind of calls back to the last thing that we talked about, where you're taking things too personal. This is becoming too personal for you. Being wrong is just hitting you way too hard. And really, there's so many components involved with what makes something right or wrong. And I even hate to say right or wrong, because if you are being given imagery, if you're being given messages, then you are following that line of truth that is being given to you. Whether it's being given to you from your intuitive abilities, your psychic abilities, or messaging that's being sent to you from someone through your mediumship, you just got to go with what you got. And if you are upset after a reading, I can understand. I've been there, but you shouldn't be taking things so personal, because there's so many factors that are involved. The energy of the person that you're reading, the energy of the spirit that is giving you your mediumship stuff. Maybe you're just not in a good headspace. Maybe you got things going on. If you are going into your readings with intention of helping someone or to provide information for this person that's sitting with you, or even for yourself, good intentions, then you are doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing, okay? And when you walk away, no matter how things went, if your intention was good, then you did your job. Know that. Even though the ego is going to come in and be like, oh, but you didn't get it right. Well, you don't know what was right, ego. I gave them exactly what I was given. I interpreted it to the best of my ability. That's all that is needed from you. Next up is that you can't accept your soul abilities. You've been shown many times that you have soul abilities, that you have psychic senses, but you just can't. You can't deal with it. Society's telling me that I'm not special enough. Society is telling me that this isn't a thing. Well, your ego is telling you that, because your ego is building those boundaries. Your ego is building what is and what isn't. But this is an example of your ego creating a world that is bounded by fear. Do you want to live in that world? No, you don't. You want to know the truth, even if that means challenging what you have been led to believe is the truth this whole time on Earth. And sometimes that takes challenging how you perceive yourself and your abilities. So if you're in a place where you feel like, oh my God, my ego is taking over, get out of here, there's one phrase that I say to myself that helps me recenter, to refocus, to summon that courage to keep going, especially when you're in the middle of a reading or just starting a reading and you're already feeling like you're on the wrong foot. And the phrase I say is, it's not about me. It's not about me. So when I say a message and the person is looking at me completely perplexed, a little bit of me dies inside, just a little bit. But what keeps me going is knowing that it's not personal. I am doing the intention that I've brought, which is I want to help this person. I want to help them because they can't help themselves quite yet. I want to give them information to help them along on their journey. It could be connecting with someone who's passed that they've wanted to connect with. It could be their own personal journey of perseverance, of overcoming obstacles, and maybe there's some obstacles on the way. Having a heads up helps people quite a bit. It helps me quite a bit. So when I'm feeling like, oh crap, like this is not the way I want it to go, I got to recenter and I got to say, listen, it's not about me. It's not about you, Sarah. It's about the person sitting in front of you. And that's when I can detach my ego. And that's when I can say, you know what? I think I'm being selfish in this moment of feeling like I'm failing. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to just take what's given to me and to pass it along. That is what is being asked of me. So it's not about me. And maybe that phrase will help you as well. So the exercise I have for you is identifying your ego blocks. And this can be basically taking a look outside of yourself on your day-to-day basis. Are you a people pleaser? This is one of the ways to identify your ego blocks. Now, it's funny that I say, are you a people pleaser? A people pleaser. Are you one of those? Because we see that as part of our personalities, as part of our identities. But this is the time to separate yourself from your ego and to look at it objectively. Is people pleasing a part of my ego? Do you want to please people? Do you have a hard time saying no to things? Are you the type of person to excel because of how people appreciate it and maybe not how you benefit from it? Is that you? Well, if you're a people pleaser, then this is going to be one of your ego blocks when it comes to doing your soul work, soul ability stuff. So when someone's sitting in front of you and you're doing a reading for them, then you are going to want to please them. Know that that's going to come up, but know that you need to adhere to truth and not placate to the ego who wants you to please that person in front of you. Next up is you can't be wrong. Are you one of those people that always has to be right? I have a little bit of that, a little bit. Are you scared of being wrong? Are you scared of failing? You always need results. Then you got to get over this, because this is not the place to be creating falsehoods. You might find that you want to fill in the blanks. You might find that you want to create logic in the messaging. But that is not what is being asked of you. What is being asked of you is to take in information and interpret it to the best of your ability, to the line of truth that is being imparted on you. If you can't be wrong, then you got to know that this is a part of your ego blocks and this is going to infiltrate your work. On the other side of that, now there's plenty of ways to identify your ego blocks, but these were kind of ones that I've experienced for myself. And the last one is that you don't believe people when they say you're right. You can't take a compliment. I was one of those people for a long time. And even though I got used to saying thank you and I appreciate that, I still wouldn't allow myself to feel what people wanted to send me for energy, which is really kind of a way to look at it. And energy work is what we're talking about. So if you aren't convinced that you have psychic or other soul abilities, even if you've had that premonitional dream, even if you've heard that phrase in your head before that guy said it, or you felt sick when others were sick but ended up feeling better once you got away from them, then that's your doubt or your fear of others' judgment. That is your doubt or fear of maybe actually knowing the truth and having to take the responsibility of that truth. A fear of succeeding. But that's when you gotta double down and you gotta be like, it's not about me. But when people are saying, you know what, you're right, I totally get that. Take that and run with it. Feed off of that energy, because this is the energy that's gonna keep your messaging on track and keep that truth flowing. That is what is being asked of you. All right. Well, there we go. The ego, how it gets in the way. Stupid ego. Hey, we all got one. We all got to deal with it. And you got to start noticing the patterns of what's specific for you in your everyday life and how it will infiltrate the work that you do. Or else your work won't be valuable. Oh, there we go. Trying to feed that ego again. Feeding truth can sometimes compete with the ego, but we all want to work our path. We all have a higher purpose, and getting to our soul abilities, our soul work, understanding it, valuing it ourselves, that's the most important thing. Seeing its value and helping others. That's what our path is for. And sometimes we got to tell the ego to beat it because it's just not helping. All right, to see this all written out, check out my blog at nextgenmedium.com. Also at nextgenmedium.com, you can sign up to get a reading yourself, or you can sign up for a development session. Hey, I got 2 of those combined together, so you can do both in one session. We do it through Zoom, and you can flip through my calendar and see what works best for you. And you can check out other podcasts, blog posts, and vlogs at my website, nextgenmedium.com. Add your name to get emails about upcoming NextGen Medium stuff. At the footer of my website, I got a little bar for you to put your email address in, and know that all that information that's collected, I think it's 2 pieces of information, that stays right with me. I don't sell it. Nobody else sees that. That's just mine. Stuff we got coming up at NextGen Medium could be educational things, contests for free readings, and a lot more. Like me on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest for all your social media liking needs. And until next time, have a pleasant rest of your day, and I'll chat with you later. See ya. Bye.